Imagine this. You've just given your time, your energy, your kindness to someone. You've been the one who listens, the one who bends over backward, the one who sacrifices your needs to make someone else happy. And in return they barely acknowledge your effort, if they even notice it at all. You've smiled through the discomfort, said yes when you should have said no, and hidden your frustration behind the mask of politeness. But something inside you is beginning to stir. It's not just the exhaustion or the resentment creeping in. It's a nagging feeling, a quiet whisper that tells you there's something deeply wrong with this pattern. You can't ignore it anymore. Why does being nice feel so empty? Why does doing the right thing, putting others before yourself, always seem to come back and bite you? Imagine waking up one day and realizing that your life is a series of well-meaning compromises, but no one, not even you, can remember the last time you did something just for yourself. The idea that nice guys finish last isn't just some cliché, it's a painful truth. Yet in a world where kindness is worshipped and politeness is paramount, isn't this the ideal? Isn't this what we're taught to be? But what if it's ruining your life? What if your obsession with being nice is quietly trapping you in a cycle of dissatisfaction, unspoken resentment, and constant self-sacrifice? What if you've spent so much of your life trying to make others comfortable, that you've forgotten how to be comfortable with yourself? We live in a culture that praises niceness as a virtue, a badge of honor. It's the currency of social interaction. We believe that if we're nice enough, we'll be loved, respected, and valued. But what if it's the very thing that's keeping you from achieving everything you truly desire? What if your niceness is really a mask? A mask that hides your true desires, your true needs, your true identity. Think about the moments when you've held back your feelings, when you've swallowed your truth just to keep the peace. You've told yourself it's for the greater good, that it's better to let things slide, that being nice will eventually bring rewards. But deep down, does it? Does it really? So what's going wrong here? What's happening beneath the surface of all this niceness? Before we dive into the answers, if this is resonating with you, if you've ever felt trapped by your own kindness, subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the unraveling of a truth you might not be ready for. You're not alone in this struggle, and the first step towards breaking free starts here. So hit subscribe now, and let's dive deeper. Behind the simple, everyday act of being nice lies a deeper, more insidious force that shapes your behavior without you even realizing it. It's not just about being polite, it's about an unconscious drive, a psychological mechanism that has been ingrained in you since childhood. But where does this drive come from, and why does it trap you in patterns of self-denial? To understand this, we need to look beyond the surface and delve into the psychology and philosophy that govern human behavior. It's not enough to merely call being nice a bad habit. There's something more profound at play. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, argued that the persona, the mask we wear in society, was often a construct designed to please others and gain acceptance. Jung believed that this persona could easily become a prison. When you're constantly trying to be what others expect of you, when you're suppressing your true self to avoid conflict or disapproval, you're living a life driven by external validation rather than internal truth. This dynamic is reflected in the nicest person. You've learned to suppress your desires, your needs, and your individuality in favor of maintaining harmony. This habit is not just a social choice, it's a survival mechanism. You've been conditioned to believe that the best way to avoid rejection, shame, and guilt is to give people what they want, even if it means you lose yourself in the process. In a world where niceness is seen as a moral virtue, it's easy to see why this happens. Every time you suppress your true feelings, every time you say yes when you really want to say no, you reinforce a deep-rooted belief that your worth is tied to others' happiness. You become a chameleon, constantly shifting to accommodate others, and in the process you lose touch with who you are. But what's worse is that the more you cater to others, the more disconnected you become from your own desires and values. And it doesn't just affect your personal relationships, it impacts every part of your life, from your career to your health. Friedrich Nietzsche, a philosopher who explored human motivation deeply, believed that the pursuit of others' approval leads to a slave morality. In his view, this morality is a system of values where individuals place others' needs above their own, giving up their autonomy in the process. Nietzsche argued that the truly empowered person, the Übermensch, is not driven by the expectations of others, but by a relentless drive to create and affirm their own values. But how does this idea relate to the nicest person? Simply put, the need to please others, to put their happiness above yours, is a form of submission. You become a servant to the whims of those around you, and your identity becomes entangled with their desires. You stop thinking for yourself and begin living for others. This is where the harm begins. When you lose touch with your own inner voice, you begin to suppress what truly matters to you. You're left with a hollow shell, a person who exists for others, but who has lost the sense of self that makes life worth living. Aldous Huxley, in his novel Brave New World, explored a society where conformity was enforced, and individuality was stifled for the sake of peace and harmony. While his vision was dystopian, it serves as a cautionary tale about the cost of being nice for the sake of fitting in. When niceness becomes the currency of social interaction, it strips away individuality and reduces human connection to mere transactional exchanges. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, would argue that the nicest person is caught in what he calls bad faith. In Sartre's view, people often hide behind roles, labels, and societal expectations to avoid confronting the existential reality of their freedom. Being nice is a form of bad faith, because it allows individuals to escape the responsibility of making authentic choices. Instead of acting out of personal conviction, you act out of fear of rejection, out of a need for approval. But what is the deeper cost of this behavior? The answer is simple, yet profound. Niceness breeds resentment. Over time, the burden of constantly putting others first, of constantly pretending to be someone you're not, begins to chip away at your emotional well-being. You begin to feel invisible. You begin to feel that no one truly knows you, or worse, that no one truly cares about who you are at your core. And here's the kicker: the more you give to others, the less they give back. Why? Because people take what you give them, but they rarely return the same level of effort. Your niceness becomes expected, and in some cases exploited. You find yourself giving more and receiving less, and this imbalance leads to feelings of frustration and bitterness. But you're too kind to say anything, so you suffer in silence. So what's really happening here? Why does this behavior persist despite its emotional toll? You may not realize it yet, but the act of being nice has subtle and pervasive consequences that shape every aspect of your life, most of which you probably never considered. These consequences don't happen overnight. They accumulate slowly, like drops of water wearing away at a stone. It's easy to ignore the small cracks in your psyche, but they're there, and left unchecked, they can lead to irreversible damage. At the heart of this issue is the way your brain processes social interactions. The human brain, particularly in the social context, is wired for reward and punishment. Neuroscientists have long understood that when we behave in ways that please others, when we comply with their desires, affirm their beliefs, or sacrifice our own needs for their benefit, we receive a small dopamine hit. This is a chemical reward, reinforcing the behavior. However, this cycle of reward becomes problematic when it's conditioned to be the main source of validation. It starts to create a dependency. You don't act for yourself anymore. You act for the dopamine rush that comes from pleasing others. Over time, this leaves you emotionally starved, because your internal emotional regulation is outsourced to others' opinions of you. Your sense of self-worth begins to rely not on who you are, but on how others perceive you. But the consequences go deeper than just emotional imbalance. There are cognitive biases at play here that can make breaking free from the cycle of niceness incredibly difficult. One of these is the sunk cost fallacy, the irrational tendency to continue an action or behavior because of the investment you've already made, even if the outcome is negative. Think about how many times you've been in a situation where you've given and given, but still kept going because you've already spent so much time or energy being nice. The more you give, the more you feel obligated to continue, even as you lose yourself in the process. You've invested so much of yourself into others' happiness that it feels impossible to stop. The moment you try to break free from this pattern, you may feel a profound sense of guilt or anxiety, an emotional response to the idea of abandoning the role you've spent so long cultivating. On top of this, there's the availability heuristic. Our brain's tendency to base judgments on information that's easiest to recall. In social settings, this manifests as the belief that being nice will always get us what we want, even if the past results don't support it. This cognitive bias keeps you trapped in a feedback loop where your brain ignores all the times your kindness has been taken for granted or exploited. Instead, you focus on the few moments where your niceness paid off, convincing yourself that it will work out if you just keep giving more. But what happens when you give and give, only to realize that people are taking and taking? The emotional toll of this situation is insidious. You may feel invisible, ignored, or at worst, unappreciated. The people you've tried so hard to please are simply moving on with their lives, while you're left standing there, emotionally exhausted, wondering where all your effort went. Then comes the resentment. You've spent so much time and energy bending over backward for others, and now you're angry, not only at them, but at yourself. You can't understand why they haven't reciprocated your kindness. You wonder why you've always put others first, only to be left with nothing in return. You've grown bitter, and yet, you don't know how to stop. This is where the true consequences begin to reveal themselves. The damage starts to infiltrate your mental and physical health. Constantly trying to please others, constantly putting their needs above your own, leads to burnout. It manifests in anxiety, depression, and a feeling of deep emptiness. Your brain's reward system has been hijacked by external validation, and as a result, you feel like a shell of the person you once were. Your identity becomes a fractured thing, based not on who you are, but on who others want you to be. And while the emotional toll is heavy, the social consequences are just as severe. The nicest person often becomes invisible in social dynamics. You don't assert your needs, and over time you may find yourself passed over in favor of others who aren't afraid to speak up or take what they want. The world rewards boldness, ambition, and assertiveness, qualities that the nicest person often lacks because they've been too focused on pleasing others to claim their own space in the world. But here's the paradox. While you may be acting out of kindness, others may see your constant willingness to comply as weakness. They don't see the sacrifice behind the smile. They see someone who can be relied upon, someone who can be used, someone who won't ask for anything in return. And as a result, you're often taken for granted. So what do you do when the scales tip too far, when the sacrifices have become too heavy, and the emotional toll is too much to bear? The time has come to confront the truth, head on. For years you've lived your life in the shadow of this niceness, sacrificing your identity, your needs, and your desires in favor of others. You've conformed, you've bent over backward, and you've kept quiet, hoping that one day things would change, that someone would recognize your sacrifices and give back. But that day never comes. The question is, what now? What if everything you've been taught about kindness, about being nice, is fundamentally flawed? What if it's not a virtue, but a prison, one you've willingly locked yourself into? It's time to challenge the very foundation of what you've been led to believe. The reality is, niceness is not a path to fulfillment. It's a trap. But breaking free from it doesn't mean abandoning kindness altogether. It means redefining it, reclaiming your power, and taking responsibility for your own happiness. So, how do you break free from the cycle of self-sacrifice? First, you must acknowledge one undeniable truth. You are not responsible for other people's happiness. This is the foundational lie that niceness feeds on. The belief that your worth is tied to others' emotional states. When you embrace this truth, everything changes. It sounds harsh, doesn't it? But think about it. How often have you compromised your own happiness to make someone else feel better? How often have you swallowed your discomfort to avoid conflict, only to end up feeling resentful and empty? Niceness convinces you that you must bear the emotional burden of others, but in reality, you have no obligation to do so. Imagine a world where you set boundaries, where you refuse to sacrifice your needs for the comfort of others. Picture yourself standing firm, not out of aggression or spite, but from a place of self-respect. You're no longer the martyr, the one who gives without receiving. Instead, you are someone who recognizes your own worth, who understands that your emotional well-being is just as important as anyone else's. Now, let's talk about boundaries. Setting boundaries is not an act of selfishness, it's an act of self-preservation. It's about recognizing that you have a finite amount of time, energy, and emotional resources, and those things are valuable. When you begin to set clear boundaries, you stop the cycle of overgiving and start reclaiming your space in relationships. Consider the work of Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, who wrote about the importance of finding meaning in life through personal responsibility. Frankl argued that we have the ability to choose our responses to the world around us, no matter the circumstances. In the context of niceness, this means choosing to prioritize your own needs and desires without feeling guilty. Frankl's philosophy teaches us that we are not victims of our circumstances or the expectations of others. We can rise above these forces by asserting our agency and taking responsibility for our own happiness. This is where true freedom lies. But here's the kicker. The moment you begin to assert yourself, you will face resistance. People will be surprised, uncomfortable, and even angry. They may try to manipulate you back into your old role, the nicest person who says yes to everything. But remember this resistance is not a reflection of your character. It's a reflection of their inability to cope with your newfound boundaries. In history, those who have broken free from societal norms and expectations are often seen as rebels, troublemakers, or outcasts. But in reality, they are the pioneers of change. Think about figures like Steve Jobs or Rosa Parks. People who refused to conform to societal expectations and instead forged their own paths. Their defiance wasn't about being mean or selfish. It was about standing up for what they believed in and refusing to be controlled by external forces. You too can be a rebel in your own life. You can choose to reject the idea that your worth is tied to your ability to please others. You can redefine what it means to be kind, to be nice, and to live authentically. To do this, you must start small. Begin by saying no when you don't want to do something. Practice asking for what you need without feeling guilty. When you set boundaries, you take back control of your life. And the more you practice, the easier it becomes. But there's something even more radical than boundary setting: embracing your authentic self. For years you've been hiding behind the mask of niceness, but underneath, there is a person with desires, needs, and opinions that deserve to be seen and heard. It's time to unmask yourself. Imagine stepping into a room, no longer worried about what others think of you, no longer seeking their approval. Instead, you walk in with your head held high, confident in who you are and what you stand for. That's what it means to live authentically. You may fear rejection, but remember, true authenticity attracts the people who will value you for who you really are, not the mask you wear to please them. The people who matter will appreciate you for your courage to be yourself. At last we reach the ultimate realization, the truth that has the power to change everything you thought you knew about being nice and about the life you've been living. This is the moment where the puzzle pieces fall into place, where the fog lifts, and where you finally see the truth that was always hidden in plain sight. The truth is this: being nice is not the path to happiness. Being true to yourself is. Let that sink in for a moment. For so long you've been chasing approval, validation, and the illusion of love through niceness. You've believed that by pleasing others, you would somehow find fulfillment. But in doing so, you've neglected the most important relationship of all, the one with yourself. It's not about being selfish, nor is it about abandoning kindness altogether. The truth is, real kindness is born from a place of authenticity. When you embrace your true self, your desires, your needs, your emotions, you have more to give. You become the person who can truly show up for others, not out of obligation, but out of genuine love and care. This is a paradox that many never grasp. You cannot give what you do not have. If you keep giving away your energy, your kindness, your love, without taking the time to fill yourself up first, you will eventually deplete yourself. True generosity comes from a place of abundance, not depletion. It's only when you honor yourself, when you stop pretending to be what others want, that you can give in a way that is sustainable and fulfilling for everyone, including yourself. You've spent so much of your life bending to others' will, trying to please everyone around you, that you've forgotten how to say no. You've forgotten what it feels like to set boundaries, to take control of your own life, and to choose yourself without guilt. This is the final step in your liberation, choosing yourself, not out of selfishness, but out of self-respect. The ultimate truth is that you don't need external validation to be worthy. Your worth comes from within. It's about embracing who you are, with all your flaws, desires, and imperfections. And when you do this, you begin to attract the right people, the ones who value you for your authenticity, not for how much you can give them. This is the breakthrough that so many never experience. But you've been given the key to unlock your true potential. The moment you embrace your authentic self, you begin to live life on your own terms. You stop living for others and start living for you. And in doing so, you create the freedom to give freely and joyfully, not from a place of neediness, but from a place of strength. As you stand at this crossroads, ask yourself this: what would your life look like if you stopped pretending to be someone you're not? What would happen if you started honoring your own needs, your own desires, and your own truth? It's time to embrace the freedom that comes from rejecting the chains of niceness. It's time to walk away from the constant pursuit of approval and step into your own power. The world needs you, not the version of you that's been trying to please everyone, but the real you, the one who dares to be authentic, unapologetic, and fully alive. As we conclude this journey, remember this: being nice isn't the goal, being authentic is. It's time to take off the mask, to stop hiding behind the persona of what you think others want, and to step into your true self. The life you've been waiting for is on the other side of this revelation. So the next time you feel the pull to be nice at the expense of your own well-being, remember, you are worthy of more. You are worthy of living a life that's true to you, and in that truth, you will find not just happiness, but the peace that comes from finally being free. Now go out into the world and be the person you were always meant to be. Don't apologize for it. Don't shrink for it. Own your truth, and in doing so, you'll change not only your life but the lives of those around you. The revolution starts with you.